Okay, all right. You landed on Island 49. I'm your host, Weston Smith. This evening, I want to deviate from everything that you've been reading over the last few days across social media, whether that's Trey Lance's hairline or Trey Lance putting in the work with Patrick Mahomes and, a bunch of quarterback coaches across social media who are critiquing positioning of his feet, extension of his legs, the release of the ball. I want to step away from that for a moment. We can come back to that. I just want to always remind everybody that football's played with pads on, and at this time of year, everybody looks good in shorts and t-shirts. But I want to talk about a more important free agent acquisition for the 49ers and how important this individual is going to be in contributing to the success of this team. So stick around, find out. Got a little surprise for you. All right. That was surprise number one for y'all. Hard at work in the lab. Shout out to my man, Christian, who's been working real hard with me behind the scenes to put together that intro video. I know it's a little long. We'll work to shorten it, but it's hard when you want to cut out some of those highlights and, flow to a beat for a little while. So I mentioned we will not be discussing Trey Lance's hairline outside of that comment. We will not be critiquing his mechanics and what he's been working on. Let's just celebrate the young man for putting in the work, recovering from the injury, and probably surrounding himself with the right people like a Patrick Mahomes, Super Bowl MVP, MVP of the league. What better company to be around to improve in the offseason. Tonight, specifically, I want to talk about who's more important to the 49ers' short-term success in 2023. Is it Kyle Shanahan or is it newly acquired defensive coordinator Steve Wilks? Surprise, surprise, by the titling of this video, thumbnail, etc. My gut in the short term is it's going to be predicated on Steve Wilks and how this defense gels. As 49er fans, we've seen this over the last few years, just really slow starts while the offense is kind of piddling around and getting in the flow and figuring things out. Defense tends to keep them in games. We saw last year, even during that stretch, how many consecutive games where they didn't give up any points in the second half and making adjustments and, letting the flow of the game come to the offense and put up enough points to ultimately get those W's during the winning streak. I see no reason why that would be any different this year. The talk of the town is always, hey, who's the quarterback going to be for the 49ers? Whether it's Brock Purdy, whether it's Trey Lance, unknown, right? Especially both recovering from injuries. Is it going to be Sam Darnold? Unknown. How much time is it going to take for the offense to gel and look similar to the way it did in the back half of the season, specifically while Brock Purdy was under center? So with that being said, while you're figuring things out, it's going to be even more crucial for the defense to step up. Now, we find ourselves in some familiar territory. We all loved Robert Saleh. We all saw what he did with the defense, specifically through 2019, even in 2020 when we were injury riddled and the team was still, record would say otherwise, but still relatively competitive. A win here, a win there. And they find themselves right back in the playoffs again. That being said, then we were pleasantly surprised by D'Amico Ryans and not seeing much drop off between Saleh and Ryans. And they ran very similar defenses. 2 years in a row, you're in the NFC Championship game. Now D'Amico has since moved on, taken the head coaching role down in Houston, obviously, and you bring in a savvy vet like Steve Wilks to come in and run your defense. One of the things that I love about Wilks is just his longevity around football. Man has been coaching a really, really long time. He's obviously had some head coaching stints along the way, filled in as an interim last year down in Carolina. So a lot of experience, a lot of leadership, the commonalities from Salah to Rhines and Wilks, what you hear up and down is they're player type coaches, which seems to fit the build and the mold of what the 49er coaching scheme is looking for. Now, the question's going to be, are we going to see drop off or are we going to see continued production? You know, if I was taking my political stance, remains to be seen, right? Jury's still out on that. We haven't, laced up the cleats, put on the pads, strapped up the helmet, and we're not out there yet to see how this performs. But there's some things that I kind of want listeners and 49ers fans to recognize as to where some of the differences might lie. One of the things that really jumps out to me when we think about what this 49ers defense has been really recognized for over the last, let's call it 4 to 5 years, is the ability or the perceived ability to get pressure with the front four, allowing you to drop more in coverage, still pressure the quarterback, force untimely decisions, but you're not outnumbered in the defensive backfield between your linebackers dropping back, etc. Obviously, we've seen a lot of with the 49ers, Warner and Greenlaw on the field and more of a five defensive back scheme. So call it your nickel, right? That's what you're going to see a lot of. And I don't expect that element to change with Wilks. One of the things that I've noticed in just kind of running stats, watching a little bit of tape around Wilks's defenses, and they haven't always been great. You know, I know they weren't the greatest of overall teams, but the defenses haven't been great. But one thing that he's more so known for than D'Amico, than Salah, is going to be blitzing, right? So he loves to be in that nickel. He loves to blitz. In fact, over the last handful of years, I mean, he's blitzing in a top 4 in the NFL rate across his different stints, right? So he's been DC, in Carolina, Arizona, Cleveland, these, and he loves to blitz. He likes to use, what's the best term for it? Just a lighter box, right? So he's trying to put more confidence that his front, let's call it 6, right? His 4 down linemen, his 2 linebackers are going to be short tacklers, and they're going to plug holes, and he's going to blitz to create a free man, right? And to create more matchups or better matchups for your down linemen, maybe even for a Warner up the middle, Greenlaw hooking out on the outside. So I expect some things like that to change, and that's going to compromise the defensive backfield, right? Like I don't want to say you're going to see more man, right? Because there are so many different zone schemes out there that have man-to-man elements in it. So I don't want to sit here and say, Steve Wilks's defenses are going to lock up one-on-one all day long, because I don't believe that to be true, right? The evidence doesn't support that. I just think they're going to have the ability to be a little bit more reactionary. They're going to have their eyes in the backfield, and they're going to be able to make plays, and they're either gonna or they're not. So more pressure going to be on Demo, Charvarius Ward, Gibson, Hufanga. We'll talk about the Gibson Hufanga exchange in just a little bit, but it starts to be a little bit more telling when you think of like the acquisition of Isaiah Oliver and some other folks that have come over, just for the mere fact that these are people that might have some familiarity with Wilks, or vice versa, that he might have familiarity with. So Miles Hartfield being the other one that played for Wilks in Carolina. Oliver was a division opponent. So Wilks has seen this man multiple times, understands that maybe he's got that raw element that might fit into his defensive scheme. The one of the other things that I think about, though, is we talk about this all the time as 49ers fan. Who's really in control here? Is it John Lynch? Is it Kyle Shanahan? I believe it to be Kyle Shanahan. And I believe that Kyle probably did a lot of his due diligence around Wilks, saying, like, if it's not broke, don't fix it. Like, I want you to come in and, we've built this defense a very specific way. So I want you to add your own flavor or your own wrinkle, but let's not deviate from the plan. Let's still create pressure with 4. Again, that's the way we're built. That's the way that we've aligned it. Obviously, we know how infatuated this this team and enamored this team is with Chris Kasurek. I'm sure he chatted with Wilks before taking the job and implementing that wide 9 front, which is not necessarily something that Wilks has, done a ton of. So there's going to be a lot of reliance around, his peers on the defensive coaching scheme. But I do expect the 49ers to blitz more than they have in the past. So like if I'm statistically speaking through this, last year, Steve Wilks blitz rate 6th in the NFL. D'Amico Ryans 18th. The other thing that's going to actually change, I think will change, is a 2 high safety look versus a 1 high safety look. Now we're talking percentage points, right? If you're breaking down plays, but the 49ers defense has been known to kind of play that 2 high safety. I think you're going to see a lot more of just Tashawn Gibson sitting back there, Hufanga playing closer to the line of scrimmage. And that leads me to believe that some of the draft strategy is going to be predicated on that. Tashawn Gibson's not a spring chicken anymore, right? 33 years old. That's an old man by NFL terms. And I know he came off a fantastic season last year, but I expect them to go find a safety. I would put safety as, priority number 2 at this point heading into the NFL draft. Somebody that might fit a little bit better in the scheme, somebody who might have a little bit more center fielder quality to them, can go hash to hash, sideline to sideline, oversee the field, right? And a bit of a ball hawk. Go find those deep passes and undercut them and take them, force a couple turnovers, and let's take it to the house. So these are just things that I just want people to be aware of. I don't expect it to. I think we were really confident when Robert Saleh walked out that D'Amico Ryans was going to look very, very similar, if not identical, plus or minus a couple things. I've touted D'Amico Ryans at being a phenomenal halftime adjustment type guy who goes with the flow of the game, listens to his players, and understands what changes that they need to make and implement in game. I don't know if I ever spoke that highly of Saleh in that regard. I just think he was a guy who always had his guys fired up, like ready to go, and those defenses were usually charging. So I'm curious as to see, Wilks is a little bit more stoic on the sideline. He doesn't get as amped up as Saleh and as D'Amico. But I am curious to see, how much of those differences come into play, right? Like how much more will this team blitz? And then that's going to put priority on who's in that defensive backfield, right? Who can handle a little bit more one-on-one, who's going to be a little bit more of a gambler, who's going to come up and tackle, right? In a lighter front, like you got to come up and make tackles first contact, got to bring them down. I mean, think of it like this. Across Steve Wilks' entire coaching career, he has spent 16 seasons across collegiate football and professional football being directly affiliated to coaching and owning the defensive back scheme, right? It's kind of his bread and butter. So why would that be any different now? I think he's going to put a lot of time and a lot of effort into these guys, and I think he's going to be very vocal or instrumental in who they might go after, in the draft, who might fit this scheme, etc. So I'm interested. Like I can't wait to see how this plays out. I don't expect a much of a drop off in terms of overall production. I just expect it to look differently, not drastically, but enough, right? Like in obvious passing situations, maybe we sit there and we're like, oh, because at the end of last season, the 49ers were not getting pressure with 4. They just weren't. You call it what it is, like put on the tape, right? Like they weren't posting sacks in record numbers like they had in like previous years. And I know Bosa's an animal, but even his production tapered a little bit in the back half of the season. So what can you do to free up those men, create mismatches? You lost some edge depth here. How are you going to replace that? And where's that sack production going to come from? And I fully expect it to come from more creative blitz packages from Steve. Again, sending linebackers, etc. But it also becomes a little bit more eye-opening to me as to like, Aziz Al-Shir, like we knew it was a foregone conclusion he was going to be gone. He didn't sign for nearly the money that I think people were expecting based on like his production and how people felt about him going to Tennessee. But now I understand why it feels a little bit more expendable, because I think you're going to see more of just Warner and Greenlaw on the field. And as much as I love Aziz, he's not kicking one of those players out of their spot anytime soon. And they're going to be as they already are, every down linebackers, and they're going to be on the field more. And you're going to see a lot more nickel from this team. One of the things that I love about what the 49ers are doing related to their defensive coordinators is the compensatory pick formula and how this is playing into it. So you got 2 for Saleh when he departed to become a head coach. You got 2 for D'Amico Ryans as he departed to become a head coach. Now, if Steve Wilks, if this team plays well, he's already been a head coach in this league, so he needs to stay at least 2 seasons. And if he does, you're going to turn that into 2 more third round compensatory picks. It's like this endless well that doesn't dry up, that they continue to replenish. So I expect him to be here for a little while. I certainly expect the defense to look differently than it has in years past. But more importantly, I believe from the bottom of my heart that early in 2023, while you're still figuring out, or we're still figuring out the quarterback position, who it's going to be, is it Trey to start and then we're going to slide to Brock when he comes back? Because I don't expect Brock to be full go by week 1. I'm sure they're going to want him. He'd probably start on the pit or the pup. So while they're figuring that out and taking some of the training wheels off the offense, I don't expect week 1 we walk out and we're putting up 30 points a game, right? So if you want to win football games, you're going to need high production from your defense early in this season, until hopefully that offense gels and then you're able to hit the ground running and we see glimpses of what we saw at the back half of last season. So again, I'm going on record, love Steve Wilks hire. I think it's unanimous around based on, who might have been out there, etc. This is the guy that probably best fits the culture and what this 49ers team is looking for and what I would say the skill sets of the players aligns to. But it's a new person who was not in-house. So there's still rapport that needs to be built. There's going to be new wrinkles and flavors introduced. How quickly do the players adapt to those? So I expect some learning curves and some growing pains that we'll probably see throughout training camp and maybe very early in the season. But again, I just kind of want to go on record and talk about how Steve Wilks early in this season is going to be more impactful to the 49ers success than Kyle Shanahan. And yes, I know that sounds crazy. Your defensive coordinator, more impactful than your offensive coordinator or your OC, but your head coach, your play caller. While Kyle is kind of the backbone of this team, I just think this defense needs to get out of the gate fast and show something different than they've shown in the past to keep that competitive edge and keep offenses on their toes, or more importantly, on their heels and guessing as to what's coming their way. And that's going to help in the growth of Drake Jackson. That's going to help shed some blocking from your defensive player of the year, Nick Bosa, free Fred and Dre to come, full steam at the quarterback. I expect to see Hufanga come a lot. We all know towards the back half of the year, it felt like in watching the tape, he was a liability in pass coverage. I'm not naive. I understand some of those are just blown coverage, and he might have just happened to be the man that's in the picture, and you automatically associate that it was his blown coverage. But let's call it what it is. Some of those were absolutely his blown coverages, and they usually happened early in games, and they were usually able to correct that mistake. But I think you always want to find ways to play to your player's strength. And one thing we've known about Huff since he got here was that, man, this dude plays a violent brand of football, Palomalo-esque, right? From USC to the long hair to the playing style. but he fits really nicely when he can play a little bit closer to the line of scrimmage, and you can send him on blitzes and minimize his, I would say, his pass coverage. I would say, minimize the amount that he needs to be in pass coverage. It's hard to completely eliminate as a safety, but I do expect them to bring in safety depth and people that are probably going to be in position to vie for, I don't want to say starting position, but an immediate contributor, just based on some of these new wrinkles and how many defensive backs, Steve Wilks is going to deploy in more of the base downs. Expect to see a lot more nickel than your just traditional 4-3. It's anybody's guess, but the history of the man, what the tape says, what his scheme says, what the statistics say around his packages and tendencies. I definitely expect a difference, and I'm really excited about that difference, because I think 49er fans a lot, over the last few years are like, why don't we blitz more? Like, I understand, but I think we were carrying that bag from 2019 when this team was phenomenal, unbelievable with getting pressure with 4. It has never looked the same in 20, 21, or 22 as it did in 19. So we need to stop pretending that we can dominate and rule all with just the front 4. They are very formidable. They are very talented, arguably the best defensive line, from edge to edge in the NFL. But again, the back half of the season, it just didn't equate. The defense played great overall, right? But the pressure, and more finishing the play in terms of generating sacks and forcing a ton of turnovers just wasn't there in the numbers that, I don't want to say that you expect, but that you certainly hope for. And hopefully, Steve Wilks has that ability to get that type of production from his defense. So I'm excited about it. Again, I know we're not talking the hot, sexy topics like, hey, what's going on with the quarterback world right now? Candidly, I'm kind of over that. I think we'll know more post draft and heading into OTAs, but I don't expect much disruption and much change at all. I do want to applaud Trey. He's got all the videos out there, and like I said earlier, he's putting in the work. That's what this is about, right? Dude's working hard. He's got a chip on his shoulder, and everything that we've claimed to know about this man, about being a hard worker and a team guy, like, candidly, I expect nothing less. Like, you should be playing with a little fire under your rear, a little scared and looking over your shoulder. Like, I know the chips haven't fallen the way that you were hoping, being the number 3 overall pick, but you're still going to get a chance here, right? So take advantage of your chances. And what says that more than, like, dude, I'm working out with the league MVP and Super Bowl winner, 2-time Super Bowl winner, Patrick Mahomes, who most people would argue is the best quarterback in football right now. So, like, what's this man doing wrong? And we're talking about mechanics and other things, and I know I'm getting off the subject a little bit, but look around, right? Like, the best in the world at every single sport, they all do something a little bit different. Your pitchers have different release points, right? Like, I'm a New York Mets guy. I was watching the Mets play the Padres, Yu Darvish, right? Like, unconventional pitcher who throws away that you could never imagine, but throws off timing, throws off rhythm. And most people say, oh, you're losing momentum because your body's not moving. You're pausing and stopping it, and you're not progressing towards the mound. Dude is still a phenomenal pitcher, right? NBA players, they all shoot different. Free throws, 3-pointers. Nobody's got the same style. Like, you're taught the fundamentals. So let's not worry too much about release point, etc. He's in there, he's working, he's going to correct it. We'll see what it looks like, in my opinion, when the pads are on. Appreciate y'all tuning in. Next week, gonna have a couple guests on for you. Well, let me check that for just a second. Barring my wife going into labor next week, because we are due with number 2 very, very shortly, I anticipate having a couple guests on Island49. Most of y'all will recognize them, but when I'll announce it kind of like the day of. But we're going to talk about a little bit more about state of the franchise. With one of the guests, I can't wait to pick their brain around some of the draft prospects that have been on their show. They've been keeping wonderful tabs around who the 49ers are having kind of their top 30 meetings with, who was at the pro day, the local pro day for the 49ers today. So I'm really excited about next week. Hopefully we get to it. Hopefully, don't tell my wife, but hopefully she can push off the pregnancy for like one more week so we can get through that. And then we can just get into the draft, and, the dust will settle. We'll come back and I'll be able to cover that. So again, appreciate you tuning into Island 49. I'm Weston Smith. Hope you all have a wonderful evening.